forgotten cities buried beneath modern streets, secrets that sleep below us. The footsteps we didn't know were echoes. There are places where silence speaks louder than the noise above. You walk down a busy street, a cafe buzzing with life, a vendor shouting his prices, someone laughing in the distance. It all seems ordinary, safe, modern, but beneath your feet, it's past, it's still breathing. Not in the obvious way, not in museums or monuments, not even in the buildings whose bricks carry age. Like wrinkles on a weathered face. No, the cities I'm about to tell you about are the ones the world forgot. Because we buried them. Not all of them were lost to disaster. Some were intentionally hidden. Others were swallowed by time, okay? And some, perhaps, were never meant to be found again. But they're still there, under layers of soil, concrete, and footsteps. Waiting, let me take you to one of them, not far from where the Seine river sighs. Through Paris, the city of light hides a darker memory. You've likely heard of the catacombs, tunnels lined with bones, ranged like books on a shelf. But before they were ossuaries, they were mines, quarries, carved long before Paris was Paris. Some say the Romans knew of these tunnels. Some say even before them, the Gauls had mapped the silence. Over time, the city grew fat above them, heavy, streets paved over chambers, markets over caverns. No one remembered what was down there till the ground began to fall. Literally, buildings started collapsing. Its holes opened in roads. The city cracked open like a secret trying to speak. It was only then that authorities sent explorers down. And what they found was not just stone and emptiness, but corridors echoing with forgotten steps, walls that seemed carved not just for structure, but ritual, symbols no one could fully decipher, paintings that shouldn't have survived, but did. One tunnel led to another, then another. Some were mapped, many weren't, and some paths, some were sealed again, for safety, they said. But sometimes safety and fear shared the same mask. Now imagine walking on that street, unaware that 10, maybe 20 meters below, a doorway remains untouched since the 1600s. A chair still sits facing a stone wall, as if someone once waited for something that never came, or perhaps something that never left. Let's go further back. Let's walk under Naples. In Italy, Napoli, Sotterranea, they call it an entire network of tunnels, aqueducts. Even homes preserved beneath the city, like a shadow cast in stone. During World War II, people hid there, families, children. They painted stars on the walls to remind themselves of the sky they couldn't see. But long before that, caves, the Greeks had carved the beginning of those chambers. They believed the earth was sacred, and that what was hidden within it held more truth than anything under the sun. The Romans expanded it, built more, used it for water, storage, ritual. Then they forgot. Centuries passed, and then, suddenly, people remembered, not because they were curious, but because they were scared. Fear brings memory back quicker than love ever could, and fear brought them back underground. That's the thing with these cities. They don't call out to explorers. They call to the desperate, the ones who need refuge, or silence, or a place where the past can't follow, or so they hope. But the past always follows, 'cause it never really stays behind, especially when it's built into the very ground we walk on, under London. There are Roman streets, under Edinburgh, Tyre vaults, where the poorest of the poor once lived. Tyre, their suffering buried, so the wealthy didn't have to see it. Under Beijing, Ming Dynasty, ruins, sealed and swallowed. Under Istanbul, cisterns that still hold the water of forgotten empires. They say time is linear, but that's only because we look at the world with horizontal eyes. If you looked vertically, you'd see centuries stacked, like pages of a book, one city layered over another, over another, over another. and we're just the most recent chapter. Do you ever wonder if the past dreams, do cities that were buried still remember the last footsteps that echoed in their corridors? Does a market square under Moscow still hold the scent of apples no longer sold? Does a temple under Mexico City still whisper prayers to gods that no longer have names? I once stood in a place like that, a room sealed under Berlin, cold, silent, a slab of stone in the middle, perfectly clean. No inscriptions, just presence. The guide said no one knew what it was for, but could feel it. That place was waiting, not for someone to find it, but for someone to remember. That's the real story. These cities beneath us, they aren't ruins, they're memories the earth refuses to forget. The maps that lied, and the ones that didn't. Maps are supposed to show us where we are and where we've been. They promise truth, certainty, orientation. But what if I told you that some of the most trusted maps in history were drawn to deceive? That entire cities were intentionally erased, or moved, or hidden beneath symbols too obscure for the common eye? And what if the real maps, the ones that didn't lie, were never drawn with ink? Let me explain. Cartography is older than most people think. Long before compass roses or coordinates, humans etched their surroundings into bark, bone, stone, or memory. But even those early maps weren't always meant to be shared, because knowing where something is really knowing gives you power. Control, and sometimes the places that are most sacred, most dangerous, or most powerful, the ones most carefully concealed. There is an ancient map found in fragments in Mesopotamia. It's no larger than a hand, clay, cracked. But what it depicts, or rather, what it omits, is what caught historians off guard. It shows rivers, kingdoms, stars, and then a blank, a deliberate absence, a space where something clearly once was, but had been scratched out. Some scholars say it was a city swallowed by war. Others say it was a sanctuary, a place the priests didn't want the invading armies to reach. But locals believe it was a place not built by humans at all. Something older. Something the gods buried for a reason. There are other maps like that in the Vatican archives. There are charts showing subterranean chambers under Rome that don't appear on any public records. It's not catacombs. Something older, deeper. Writings around the edges describe structures of forgotten worship and foundations, predating stone. And those maps, they're marked not with names, but with warnings. In India, the ancient scrolls tell of underground palaces, labyrinths, so intricate that once you entered, you could never leave unless the earth allowed it. Legends, perhaps, but what about the cities that were found long after? They were removed from every known record. Kate Talyak, for instance, buried for over 9,000 years in what is now Turkey, a complex civilization with art, architecture, community completely hidden beneath fields that generations plowed without suspecting the past beneath their feet. No one mapped it, not until a shepherd tripped over something that wasn't a stone. That's how many of these cities are found, not by scholars, but by accidents, by cracks in the earth, by curiosity that won't stay quiet. Sometimes the land itself rebels against FORGETFULNESS. Do you know what's more unsettling than a map that lies? A map that changes. There are cases recorded by old travelers and monks of charts that shifted over time, valleys that moved, roads that vanished, mountains that changed shape. Some blame earthquakes, others say it's just a bad memory. But a few believe there are places in the world that move themselves, that the cities buried below have a will, that they don't want to be found, or worse, they don't want to stay hidden forever. In South America, near the Andes, indigenous tribes speak of the city that walks. It's not in the literal sense, but a city that reveals itself only when it chooses, when the stars align, when the silence deepens just enough. And those who see it, they never return the same. Some come back and forget their names. Some speak of doorways that breathe, and some, well, some don't come back at all. What if these cities we buried are still alive? Not in the way we understand life, but in the way trees remember storms, in the way rivers remember paths no longer visible. Some maps were made with words, stories passed down like torchlight through generations. In Polynesia, the navigators didn't need maps. They read the waves, the stars, the feel of the wind. Spoke of underwater ridges, of lands that once stood tall, but had since been swallowed by the sea. And they weren't wrong. Satellite imagery now shows ruins beneath the Pacific. Not just coral, not just rock, but walls, stairs, patterns, proof. The modern maps didn't show them, but the stories did. There's something poetic about that, isn't there? That the truth, the real truth, doesn't always survive in paper and ink, but in whispers, in dreams, in the shape of a hill that doesn't match the ones around it, in the sound of wind blowing through cracks where no building stands. If you're quiet enough, you might notice a slope in the road that curves without reason, a metal door in the basement that leads to Nothinga, subway tunnel that veers off to a wall of solid stone. You think it's a dead end, but maybe, just maybe, it's an entrance, one that was sealed not to protect you from what's inside, but to protect what's inside from you. After all, some cities were buried to preserve their soul. Others were buried to contain it. Doors without buildings, in rooms that shouldn't exist. There is something unsettling about a door that leads nowhere. Worse still, a door that once led somewhere, but now just stands alone, naked, without frame or foundation, as if the world around it had dissolved. But the doorway refused to forget its purpose. I've seen them, not just in photographs or books, but in alleys where shadows fall too quietly, in basements where the air turns colder for no reason, in forests half swallowed by vines, where stone thresholds jut from the earth like the spine of a memory trying to stand up again. What were they? Leftovers, entrances, warnings. The truth is, not every door needs a room behind it. Some doors were made to separate too, to keep something in or something out. Let me tell you about a place beneath. Prague. The city's known for its beauty, its clock towers, its bridges, its music. But below it lies another Prague, one that tourists don't see. One that wasn't simply built and forgotten, but buried on purpose. They call it the Old City. Not because of age, but because of its defiance. See, centuries ago, the Vltava River would flood often. So instead of tearing down the lower levels, the citizens of Prague did something strange. They built over them. They raised the streets, lifted entire neighborhoods, buried the bottom floors, and left everything intact. That's right. If you walk into certain basements today, you're actually stepping into what used to be the ground floor of a city that chose to hide its own skin. You'll find staircases that lead up into brick, windows that now face walls, and doors perfectly preserved, locked, with no key and no building around them. Some of these rooms are now used for storage, wine, utilities, but others remain closed. When asked why, the locals simply shrug. It's always been like that, they say. But always, it's a strange word. When stone can forget, there are even more chilling examples. In Cappadocia, Turkey, the land of fairy chimneys and volcanic rock, there lies Derinkuyu, subterranean city stretching 18 levels down. It wasn't just a hiding place. It was a civilization below the surface, with CHAPELS, stables, schools, even wells, so deep. They tapped into ancient aquifers, but what haunts me most are the doors. Circular stones, like giant mill wheels, designed to roll shut from the inside. Each level could be sealed, not from intruders, but from something else. And still today, deeper levels remain unexplored. Some due to collapse, others because something felt wrong. Rooms where electronics fail, where compasses spin, where voices echo even when no one speaks. And sometimes doors are found at the end of tunnels that shouldn't be there because, according to the maps, they don't exist. They're not entrances, they're interruptions. Reminders that not all architecture obeys logic. Take Edinburgh again. Under the old town lies a maze of vaults, rooms, and sealed passageways, but among them one chamber stands. Out. No official record, no construction date, no known purpose, and yet, inside, is furniture that doesn't match the era. Books in languages no one can identify, and a single candle. Melted down, but never lit. No soot, no smoked, just presence, and a door locked from the inside, but no one was ever found within. Now imagine this. You're walking through a modern city, New York, Tokyo, São Paulo. You pass by a graffiti-covered wall, an alley no one uses, and behind a dumpster, you spot something strange, a handle attached to wood, and you realize it's a door, old, solid, embedded into the concrete like a scar. And when you press your ear to it, you don't hear silence. You hear a hum, low, faint, alive. These are the rooms that shouldn't exist, the thresholds that forgot they were supposed to be forgotten. They remain like teeth in the mouth of the earth. They remember, even if we dance single quotes, and if you ever find one, I urge you, gently, lovingly, not to open it, because some doors were left behind, not because they were forgotten, but because the world agreed in silent unison that they were better left unopened. And yet, they wait, and they whisper in a language we once understood long ago. For the surface convinced us that only what we see is real. The light that never reached the surface. Tease, not all darkness is empty, and not all light comes from above. There were cities, entire civilizations that learned to live without the sun, that adapted not by climbing toward the sky, but by sinking gently into the ground and carrying their fire with them. You'd think the absence of light would mean the absence of life, but sometimes the deepest places glow with the quietest brilliance. Let me show you, far beneath modern cities, in chambers that haven't seen daylight in centuries, you can still find traces of illumination, not from modern electricity, but from something older, something more deliberate. In the ancient underground city of Niort in northern France, there are over 300 rooms carved into chalk rock. During World War I, soldiers used it as shelter, but the tunnels themselves date back much further. What's fascinating isn't just the architecture, but the soot marks on ceilings where flames once danced. Torches were placed at precise angles, in patterns, as if the people who lit them were guiding something more than just their eyes, as if light, for them, was a language in Jerusalem. Within the western wall tunnels, archaeologists discovered ancient oil lamps. Tiny, palm-sized vessels with blackened tips were placed in niches along walls so narrow a grown man could barely pass. But the flame was there always, not because someone needed it to see, but because someone wanted it to be seen. Who, exactly? We don't know. But isn't that the point? That light can be left behind, not just to illuminate, but to remember. In Malta, the Hypogeum of Calciflini is perhaps one of the most haunting examples. A subterranean temple carved over 5,000 years ago. Its chambers are aligned in such a way that sound travels perfectly from one room to another. Some even call it an ancient acoustic machine. But more than that, certain rooms were found to contain traces of glowing minerals, elements embedded into the walls themselves, not paint, not decoration, quote, but stone that shimmered softly in the dark. Some believe the builders understood something we don't. that the earth doesn't just absorb light, it can echo it. Imagine that rooms where light wasn't added, but awakened. In modern Tokyo, under the bustling surface, lies a structure known as the GCANS project, a massive underground, cloaked control system. It looks like a cathedral of concrete, but some parts of it remain unexplained. Walls that resonate, rooms that are always slightly warmer than they should be, and in one corridor, a faint, persistent glow, long after the lights are turned off. Engineers chalk it up to reflections, but when you walk through it, you feel watched, not threatened. It's remembered. That kind of light doesn't hurt the eyes. It touches the skin like memory. There are stories scattered across Siberia, Mongolia, and the Arctic of tribes who spoke of the sleeping lights, places where the ground itself gave off a faint radiance, where plants grew even underground, where time passed differently. Many dismissed these stories until scientists discovered entire ecosystems in deep caves, untouched by sunlight, bacteria that produced their own luminescence, mushrooms that glowed green, pools that shimmered like stars drowned in silence. Life born of darkness. But here's the truth I think we've forgotten. Light was never just a tool, it was a presence. It marked the sacred, the hidden, the places where stories refused to die. When archaeologists entered certain sealed tombs in Egypt, they found lamps still intact, still filled, as if someone, somewhere, still expected them to be lit. And in Peru, deep in Andean caves, were ceremonial halls where shards of crystal had been arranged in perfect spirals, not for sight, but for sound, because light, too, can be heard if you know how to listen. Some say the people who built these underground places had no choice, that they were hiding, surviving, escaping the wrath of surface, storms, or enemies. But I believe something else. I believe some of them chose the depths because the surface was too loud, too fleeting, too blind to what mattered. And down there, below the noise, beneath the distractions, they found a different kind of light, not the kind that burns, but the kind that remembers, the kind that lingers, the kind that never needed the sky. When the earth opens its eyes and remembers what we forgot, there is a silence the earth keeps, not out of secrecy, but out of patience. It waits beneath asphalt and brick, beneath stories written in steel. It waits for us to listen again, not with ears, but with something deeper, a kind of memory that doesn't belong to the brain, but to the body, to the bones, to the parts of us that remember what we never lived and feel haunted by places we've never been. Have you ever stood in a city square, crowded, loud, modern, and felt a shiver run through your spine for no reason at all? Have you ever stepped into a building newly renovated and suddenly felt like you were being watched, not by people, but by the walls? That's not imagination. That's the earth opening its eyes beneath you. Let me tell you something forgotten. Long ago, before cities were measured in population or skyline, they were measured by soul. A city was a being, a spirit, a living memory carved in stone and soil. When a city was built, the people didn't just build it on the land. They built it, quit, with the land. They listened. They watched where the wind moved. They studied the cracks in the rock. They followed the patterns of animals. And when they finally chose where to dig, they did so gently, not to conquer the earth, but to invite it. That's why in so many ancient ruins, you'll find symmetry with nature, temples aligned with solstices, chambers that echo only at the right time of year, wells that fill only when the stars cross certain paths. These were not accidents, they were conversations. But then, we stopped listening. We paved over the dialogue. We forgot that the ground beneath our feet had memory, and the cities we buried. They weren't just places. They were stories, prayers, regrets, dreams, cast in stone, sealed in silence, until now. Because lately, the earth has begun to speak again. not in words, but in the subtle ways that only silence understands. Sinkholes opening in perfect circles, ancient chambers discovered under subway lines, children who draw cities they've never seen, only to have. Archaeologists confirmed them years later. Dreams of staircases that spiral downward, deeper and deeper, until they end in a room full of mirrors. Mirrors that don't reflect faces, but futures. You might laugh at that, call it myth. But let me ask you something. If the earth has skin, doesn't it also have eyes? Okay. And if it sees, does it not also remember? Okay. There is a cave in Slovenia where monks once went to meditate. No one knows who built it. It wasn't carved. It was formed. The stone shaped not by tools, but by water and time inside. There's a chamber with a hole in the ceiling, and once a year, at the exact same minute, a single beam of light falls onto a stone in the center. Stone shaped like a heart, not a metaphor, a literal heart, weathered, beating with silence. When it glows, they say, the cave breathes. That's what memory looks like when it isn't made of ink or sound, but stone. And the cities buried below us, they are hearts, too. They pulse with what we've forgotten. They call not to our logic, but to our longing, because somewhere in all of us is the ache of something lost. A home we don't remember, a room we never left, a doorway that's always being closed, not because it was locked, but because we stopped knocking. But the earth, she still waits. She opens her eyes in tremors. She sighs in wind tunnels. She sings in echo chambers no one dares to enter. And when we walk over her secrets, she listens to our steps. She measures the rhythm of our lives. And maybe, just maybe, she wonders if we'll ever stop long enough. So remember, because we didn't bury those cities to hide them. We buried them to see if we'd ever care enough to bring them back into the light. Not to rebuild, but to understand, to feel, to remember who we were. For we learned to forget. The stairs that descend when no one watches. Some structures are not built to be seen, only felt. There are staircases in the world that appear in places they shouldn't. No blueprint, no entry on any map, no recorded architect. And yet, there they are, stone or iron, wood or clay, leading downward. Always downward, but what waits at the bottom? No one ever says, because not all stairs are meant to be climbed. Some are meant to be remembered. Let me tell you about a town in Spain, small, quiet, with cobblestone streets and balconies bursting with flowers. Tourists pass through, snapping photos of old churches and painted doors. But beneath that town is a rumor that inside one of the houses, one knows which, there's a trapdoor beneath the dining room table. Okay? And under that door, a spiral staircase, carved not with modern tools, but with the kind of precision that doesn't belong to any known time. People say the air changes on the third step, colder, thicker, and that if you descend past the 13th step, the sounds of the town vanish completely. But no one ever counts past 30, because the stairs don't seem to end. You stop walking, but they don't stop descending, as if they're not taking you down, but somewhere else entirely. You might be thinking, urban legends, fairy tales for dreamers. But then explain this. In 1987, a group of engineers in Poland surveyed land for a new subway expansion. During testing, their equipment recorded a hollow space beneath the city, nearly 50 meters wide. It's perfectly circular. No record of prior excavation. When they sent a camera down, it showed stone stairs along the wall, descending in a smooth spiral, like a seashell carved from shadow. No railings, no breaks, just step after step after step. But then the footage cut to black. No interference, no damage, just darkness. The project was rerouted. The footage was stored in the stairwell, sealed. But every few years, people living in the area report strange sensations, a pull, a hum, and sometimes dreams. of walking down stairs that feel familiar, even though they've never been there before. And always, always, a sound behind them, footsteps, not echoing, following. There's a deeper truth here. Stairs are symbols. They represent descent into memory, to the unconscious, into the layers of the self we prefer not to disturb. Think about it. Most people are afraid of climbing high places because of the fall. But descending is a different kind of fear, because going down means confronting what was buried. And the deeper you go, the more you feel the pressure, not from above, but from within. There's an ancient temple in Guatemala. Beneath the ruins, explorers found a hidden chamber. No inscriptions, no offerings, just stairs leading down. But the staircase ends abruptly, not at a floor, but at a mirror, polished stone, impossibly reflective. And when they shined a light onto it, the reflection didn't match what they expected. The light bent, returned in strange shapes. And those who looked too long, well, some say they saw themselves. Others say they saw who they used to be, or who they were meant to become. The local tribes speak of the descent of the soul. They say the earth gives you stairs only when you're ready to meet what waits below. And what waits? Memory, not yours, the land's, because the earth remembers it. Remembers the cities we built with reverence. It remembers the laughter in stone, corridors now filled with dust. It remembers the songs sung in tunnels, no longer echoing, and sometimes, when it feels safe, it opens a stairwell, just one dot, to see if we still care, to see if anyone still knows how to walk downward without fear, to listen, to feel, to remember. But be warned, not all who descend come back, not because something holds them, but because something awakens. And once you remember a part of the world that the rest has forgotten, it becomes very, very hard to return to pretending. The names that the dust refused to erase. There are names you forget the moment you hear them, and how names that refuse to be forgotten, not because they are repeated, but because they are remembered by the world itself. You may bury a city. You may destroy its language, erase its books, scatter its people, but some names, some names remain etched in the dust, like fingerprints pressed into time, because the earth, unlike us, does not forget. Let me show you. In the middle of the Syrian desert lies the ruin of a once great city, Palmyra. Columns rise like broken ribs from the sand. The skeleton of a civilization that once traded silk and spices, poetry and gods. When archaeologists brushed away the dust, they expected blank stone, weathered smooth by time. But what they found were names, carved deeply, repeated often, on walls, on altars, even on the undersides of stones where no sunlight had touched for centuries. These weren't names of kings or emperors. They were names of mothers, children, merchants, musicians. It was as if the people had known, somehow, that forgetting would be the final death. So they wrote and wrote, and the desert silence kept every word. Now travel with me beneath the streets of modern Cairo. There, hidden under tangled pipes and concrete, lies a chamber, untouched since before the pharaohs. It wasn't a tomb. It wasn't a shrine. It was a room filled with clay. Tablets, all etched with one thing. Names. No context. No titles. Just names. Over and over. A few scholars tried to decipher. Some matched with old records. Others did not. But the locals believe those are the names of the forgotten, the ones history refused to carry. And the room, it's a sanctuary for remembrance, because names are more than sounds. They are echoes of being, carrying with them the breath of lives lived and the longing of lives interrupted. There's a legend in Romania, in a village built over old ruins. There's a well, and inside its stone wall, beneath the moss and shadow, is a single name carved in a script no one recognizes. Children play around it, unaware. But every spring, when the rains come. The water level rises, and that name glows faintly, pale blue, as if the earth were reminding itself not to forget. You see, forgetting is a human act, but remembering is sacred. In the earth, she remembers in her own ways, in the way vines crawl over the same stones year after year, in the way wind echoes a syllable that no longer belongs to any living language, in the way birds nest in the same crack in the wall, as if drawn not by instinct, but by memory. Names have weight, and when they are spoken aloud, or even felt, they return, sometimes in dreams, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in the ache of standing in a place you've never been, and feeling like someone there already knows you. I once walked through an abandoned mining town in the north, its buildings sagging under the weight of time, streets claimed by grass, in silence, on the side of an old store. Someone had scratched a name, not deeply, just enough, and though rain had worn the wall thin, the name remained, and next to it, I will come back. Maybe they never did, or maybe they never had to, because the name stayed, the dust carried it, and that was enough. Now ask yourself, what names lie beneath your city, under your home, beneath your school? Not just famous ones, not just the ones with statues, but the ones spoken in kitchens, sung in lullabies, wept into pillowcases, names whispered during war, names carved into basement beams before fleeing, names sewn into the hems of dresses, hidden from soldiers. The earth remembers them all. She doesn't care about fame. She cares about presence. In some cities, the buried ones still whisper names in the dark. They drift through cracks, through walls, through dreams, not to haunt, but to be held, to be heard again, even just once, because no name wants to be erased completely, and the dust. It's not just what remains, it's what protects, it's what carries, and sometimes, if you're quiet enough, it's what speaks, the echoes that walk without sound. There are places where silence isn't empty, it's inhabited, it breathes, it moves, and if you wait long enough, will stop moving altogether. You'll feel it, a shift, a presence, the soft brush of something passing by, though no wind follows. Some cities, though buried, are not still. They carry echoes, not the kind you hear, but the kind you feel. In some of those echoes, walk, let me take you underground again. This time, beneath the streets of Odessa, Ukraine. An intricate network of catacombs stretches over 2,000 kilometers, making it one of the largest in the world. Some say they were carved from limestone. Others say the tunnels existed long before the city above. But what haunts the catacombs isn't just their depth or scale, it's the footsteps. Every year, explorers venture in, most return, some don't, and some come back, changed. They speak of sounds that mimic their own steps, but arrive a second too late, or early, as if their shadow was walking ahead or behind. Some report seeing a flicker of movement in the corner of their eye. Not a rat, not a person, something remembering how to move. A camera left overnight once captured nothing except static, but when the footage was played in reverse, a shape could be seen, pacing, slowly, deliberately, not trying to be seen, but not hiding either, just moving, like an echo, trying to find its voice again. In Scotland, beneath the city of Edinburgh, lie the infamous vaults, damp, dark rooms, beneath bridges and markets, once used for storage, then for illegal trade, then for shelter by the poorest dot. Now, mostly empty, but tour guides tell of guests who feel touched when no one is near, of lights that flicker in rooms without electricity, of pressure in the air, like someone watching from just out of sight, and always footsteps, but not coming from behind or above, from below, as if the floor itself were remembering the rhythm of someone who used to walk that very path again and again, until it became part of the stone's heartbeat. In Kyoto, Japan, beneath an ancient temple, monks speak of Utasimi, shadows that do not belong to bodies, but to memories. One monk described walking into a room where the candlelight refused to settle. It bent, moved unnaturally, as if repelled. He stood still, and he felt it, not cold, not evil, but motion, a presence retracing its steps, not out of haunting, but out of habit, as if a life once lived so deeply there. The walls themselves replayed it in loops. We often think of ghosts as spirits who stay behind. But what if these movements are not spirits? What if they are echoes with nowhere left to go? Rhythms once lived so powerfully that they stamped themselves into the structure of time. There is a house in Lisbon, Portugal, uninhabited for over a century. Locals say that on quiet nights, you can hear someone sweeping inside, always sweeping, never pausing. But when the house was opened recently by historians, they found something strange. The floor was spotless, and beside the fireplace, they found an old wooden broom, standing upright, not fallen, just waiting to be held again. You begin to understand something, don't you? That cities don't sleep just because we stop looking. That movement doesn't end just because bodies decay sometimes. A place holds onto the rhythm of life so tightly, it continues to walk without legs, to whisper without breath, to echo without sound. The Mayans believed in spirit weight, that certain paths, once walked with enough intention or emotion, became permanently impressed upon the world, not visually, not physically, but spiritually. And those paths, they walk themselves, sometimes in circles, sometimes toward something, sometimes toward you. And what do they want? Not fear, not attention, just recognition. Because motion is memory in disguise. And when you feel that sudden cold, that invisible touch, that pause in your breath that makes your chest tighten, it may not be fear. It may be history brushing past, a forgotten footstep retracing its journey. Not lost, not gone, just moving through silence, looking for the ears that can still hear what no longer makes a sound. The city that never let go. Most cities die quietly. They crumble, sink, burn, or are simply abandoned, left to be claimed by vines, silence, or sand. But some refuse, not out of pride, not out of anger, but out of memory, because they remember. Cool much to let go. And sometimes in the deepest folds of the earth, there are cities that didn't forget how to live. They simply learned how to hide. Theirs, a story told by miners in South America, not a folktale, a warning. It's passed between generations, that beneath the Andes, somewhere beyond the mapped tunnels, there's a city made of black stone, smooth, uncarved, warm to the touch. No one has found it, but everyone who goes deep enough dreams of it. The same dream, a staircase carved from obsidian, a sky that isn't a sky, but moves like breathing stone, and silence that isn't silence. It pulses like a heart beneath its floor. Some wake up crying, others refuse to go back into the mind's dot, and a few, the ones who go deeper, vanish. Their tools found stacked neatly beside the last torch, as if they walked into something that welcomed them and never let go. In China, an ancient scroll was discovered in a collapsed monastery. Its pages spoke not of gods, but of the sleeping province, a city that once shunned by the heavens, turned inward and buried itself voluntarily. They say its people believed that memory was sacred, too sacred to risk. ERASURE. So they took their temples, their homes, their voices, sank them beneath the ground. A deliberate burial, a preservation. The scroll ends with one phrase, repeated again and again. We are not gone. We are listening. In modern times, a team of geologists studying underground acoustics in Northern Europe encountered something inexplicable beneath layers of untouched earth. Their instruments picked up low-frequency patterns, not natural, not seismic, but rhythmic, repeating, measured, like breath or song. They dismissed it as error, equipment malfunction. But one researcher kept listening, night after night, and over time, she swore the rhythm began to change, to respond to her, not with words, but with presence. She left the project soon after, moved to a quiet village, never spoke of it again, but before she vanished, she left behind one note. The city is alive. It knows your name before you say it. Think of that. City that remembers you before you remember yourself. A place beneath places where time folds. Not forward, but inward. Where walls breathe. Where names are sung, not aloud, but through vibration. Where no light is needed because memory illuminates all things. Some believe these cities are myths, projections of our longing to belong somewhere eternal. But what if they're not myths? What if they are dreams the earth continues to have? And some of us, the sensitives, the sleepless, the ones who pause when a street feels too quiet, what if we are the ones who hear the city dreaming and are drawn to it? There is a mountain in Africa the locals call the listening peak. Not because it echoes, but because when you sit on its slopes in complete silence, you feel something under the rock, a hum, a pull, and if you sit long enough, you'll hear it, a voice with no language, calling home, not with sound, but with memory. Maybe there is a city beneath us all. Maybe it isn't made of stone or steel. Maybe it's made of every heartbeat that ever loved a place, every farewell that lingered too long, every step that felt like destiny. Maybe the city that never let go isn't beneath us. Maybe it is us, waiting to be remembered. The door that opens only in silence. There are doors the world forgets how to open, not because they are locked, but because the key was never a key. It was silence, not the silence of absence or of fear, but the sacred kind, the kind that listens, the kind that waits. And in that stillness, the forgotten cities breathe, not in ruins, not in rubble, but in rhythm, in memory, in the shape of a stairwell that turns a little too smoothly, in the scent of old stone when rain touches earth, in the echo that answers even when you haven't spoken. There is a legend among the Sami, people of the north, that the oldest cities were not built above the earth, but within it, and that the last of these cities remains not in space, but in attention. You cannot find it on a map. You cannot be led to it. You must be called, and when you are, it will not appear with lights or signs. It will begin as a feeling, a pressure in the chest when you stand over, certain soil dot a warmth when you pass a stone that should feel cold. Whisper when you step into a room and forget why you entered. The city speaks without sound. It remembers your name, not the one on your documents, but the one you forgot you carried, the name that exists only in silence, only in the dark, only when the noise of the world has been put down, and you are still. That's when the door opens. It doesn't swing or creak. It becomes suddenly. It's there. You step through, not with feet, but with memory, and inside. It's not grandeur, not fear, but familiarity. You've been here before, somewhere, deep, somewhere sacred, where everything you tried to forget remembers you, where the pieces of yourself left scattered in noise gather not to judge, not to change, but to sit with you, to tell you that you were never truly lost, only buried, and like all cities that sleep beneath the noise of modern life, you, too, are waiting for someone to pause, to listen, to remember. We bury things we fear. We bury things we love. We bury things we cannot yet carry. But the buried do not disappear. They wait in soil, in stone, in story, in silence. And when we are quiet enough, we finally stop trying to hear and begin to feel. Door opens, and we remember not just the cities we lost, but the parts of ourselves that were never meant to be forgotten.